go into this place and I can feel powerful over these men. Like that's literally how I felt. I was like, oh, these men are giving me money. Like I call the shots. Like I basically tell them what I want and like they do what I want.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mommy Mindset Mentor. So today I'm so excited because we're going to be talking to a stripper turned Christian. So you guys are going to hear more about her story in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And make sure that you guys subscribe and hit the like button and turn on your post notifications so you never miss one of my videos. I'm so excited. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, love?
I'm good. I went to sleep like at 5 in the morning, no, 6 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Then usually I don't wake up until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta like force myself up, throw cold water in my face, get a cup of coffee. All right, guys, so welcome back to another episode of the Mommy Mindset Mentor, where we talk about faith, motherhood, mindset, self-improvement. And today I have Hannah with me, and she used to work at a strip club for about a decade. And I'm gonna let her tell her story because I don't know much about it except from what I've seen on Instagram. And so this is gonna be a story about a stripper turned Christian and who has turned her whole life around. And she's gonna share some of like her lessons and things that she has learned. So thank you so much for being here today, Hannah.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor and I'm so excited for this conversation.
Okay, so I want to know, first of all, is it is it rude to call somebody a stripper, or do you guys, or like, are people like, should I refer to strippers as dancers, like exotic dancer, or is it rude to call somebody a stripper?
I think it's just kind of like a thing amongst strippers. We just refer to ourselves as dancers because I think it just sounds like more classy.
Exotic dancer or dancer?
Just dancer. Yeah, just dancer because I think like society has just given the like the title of stripper like just a bad rap, you know? And people just assume like it's, I don't know, something that it's not. That's like a whole separate conversation, but yeah, I mean, you can say whatever. I personally don't mind, but I usually just say dancer.
Okay, so I want to know, how did you get, like, how old were you when you started dancing, and how did you even get into that lifestyle?
So, I was 20 years old, when I started at my first club. I'm 29 now. So basically it was just me wanting to make my own money. Like I was in college. I went to a private college in Orange County, California. So basically everyone there had money, whether it was, you know, their family's money, daddy's money, whatever it was, they had money. And I came from kind of like a middle class family. So I just never had a lot of money and I always would want to make my own money. Like even in high school, I would work, I made my own money, like I would babysit. I was always working and hustling. That was always just like in my blood. So when I was on my own in college, I was looking for a job and I just kept getting rejected at like every job I applied for. Like I remember I really wanted to work at Starbucks. That was like my dream because I was like, free coffee, you know? And they would make comments because I had like a nose piercing and I had my nails done. And they were like, oh, you're going to have to, you know, change that and this and that. And I just always felt like I was never good enough. And it was like really frustrating because I knew I was a hard worker. I knew I was smart. I knew I had a lot to offer. And I just kept getting rejected from these quote unquote like normal jobs. Right. So I went on Craigslist, and this was like, honestly, at this time, Craigslist wasn't super sketch. Like people went on there. Like I remember I had a friend that found her roommate on there and they're like still best friends. So it wasn't like it is now where it's not really the place to go. You know, it was like you could find jobs on Craigslist. So I went on there and I saw an ad for like no experience necessary, like waitress position, and I didn't say like what it was or anything. So I just applied. I got an interview. I showed up and it was literally a strip club. And I didn't even realize what it was until I got there. And I walked in and it was literally like 3 p.m. in the day. There's like a naked woman on stage. I'm like, okay, we're here. Like, all right. Needless to say, like I got the job right away and I wasn't going to turn it down because, like I said, I had been rejected from so many other positions that I was like, well, I want to work, you know? So I started as a waitress and I worked there for about like 2 or 3 months. But I was only working the weekends and I wasn't really making that much money because it was a fully nude club and they only served like soft drinks and energy drinks. So I had to kind of like harass people to even buy one drink in the first place. And it just was like not the vibe. And I saw how much the dancers were making and I was like, yo, like maybe I should try this, you know? So one day I just decided to go audition. I went to a different club because I didn't want to be at the same place because I was like, this is awkward. So I went to a different club, auditioned. My first night, I made like a shit ton of money. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to start doing this. And yeah, it just kind of spiraled from there.
When I was like 18, like I was like, oh my gosh, like what would it be like to work at a club? What would it be like to be a dancer? Like I always see them make so much money. So I feel like a lot of other girls who are like my age or even older have thought about, you know, working at a strip club, but we're like kind of scared. So what is auditions like? Because like I look up YouTube videos and there's not much footage of like what it's like inside of a club. So what is auditions like, and like have you always been like a dancer like when you were younger? Like how did you learn, you know, to work the pole and dance?
Great question. And I just want to say, like, going off of what you were saying about, you know, women just kind of envisioning like what would this be like? I see that all the time. And I think honestly, I don't know what it is, but I think every woman deep down like wants to be a stripper at some point. Like whether it be in a club or just like for their husband or whatever. It's like this like desire to just be in that feminine empowered essence, I think is what it is. And this is like probably maybe I'll have questions about this later on, but um that is pretty much why I kept going in dancing, is because that's like what I found within it was, yeah, the money was great, but apart from that, it was like the empowerment of being this like feminine, beautiful woman that was like seen and, you know, looked at and lusted after. Like it was filling that desire within me. So feminine, beautiful woman that was like seen and, you know, looked at and lusted after. Like it was filling that desire within me. So but going back to your question, auditions are very, very easy. Super chill. Like, I mean, it varies depending on which club you're at, but basically at like different clubs kind of have like a different image that they're looking for, right? And I've kind of noticed that over time. I've worked at a lot of different clubs. I've auditioned at a lot of different clubs. And so you kind of have to find one that's going to fit your vibe. Because you could be beautiful. Like, I mean, people look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're fit, you're pretty. Like, why would you not get hired? There's places that I've gotten rejected at, you know, and I don't take it personally. It's just because I'm not fit for like the vibe of that club, right? So first of all, like that's, you know, something they're looking for is just like, is this kind of, are you the vibe that we're looking for? And then you know, basically, are you pretty? Like it doesn't even matter if you can dance or not. Like it's literally just comes down to like, what do you look like? What does your body look like? Some places don't like if you have a lot of tattoos or things like that, but trust me, like I could not dance at all when I started. Like I was terrible. My shoes fell off during the audition. Like it was a mess. Like I don't even know how I got hired, but I did. Some places just literally hire anyone. So I got lucky, I guess. But I think just because I had worked as a waitress in the club for a couple months before I auditioned, I kind of got a sense of what to do, like how to dance. Like I kind of like got a feel for it beforehand. And then obviously as time goes on, you just, experience. So,
So on to my next question, because you did say like on your first night, like you made a shit ton of money. What was the most money you've ever made in a night, and have you ever left a club with no money, like negative?
I think the most I made, I think it was around like almost 3 grand. Something like that. I worked in Vegas a few times and it was one of those nights. But I would say like typically it would be like it is good money, but I feel like a lot of girls that post like the money that they're making on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like it seems like they're always doing well. And no one ever really talks about, like you said, the nights when you do leave with nothing. And that rarely happens, honestly, unless you're just like super lazy. Like you can always make something, even if it's not much. I think there was maybe like once or twice where I walked out with nothing, but honestly, like it was because I was being super lazy on top of it being slow. So it's not like typical, but there would be nights where I would leave with only, 100, $200, maybe three, which is still like good. But for the job, you look at it as like, this was a shit night because of what you're going through to make that money. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and like they talk about like, sometimes like with the when you have to like tip out and like you have to like pay the club, but it's like dang, you didn't even make that much. Even though $300 a night is good because there's people making $300 a week, but compared to like how other times like where you've made more money. So how did you pivot? How did you what made you decide to turn away from that life? And you talk a lot about identity and identity in Christ and purpose. And so, what made you decide to change?
That's a loaded question, girl. um, so I actually grew up Christian, believe it or not. I grew up in a very religious household. My brother is a pastor, and I've always been like aware of God. I've always known God. I went to church every Sunday, right? And so I think part of me like choosing this path and choosing this lifestyle was almost a little bit of like a rebellion in a sense, but also just me feeling like I wanted this freedom that I feel that I never had. And it's hard because I think there's so many pros to the fact that I was raised with religion, and I always had that foundation of Christ and foundation of God to like turn back to. But I think there's also a lot of cons because of the fact that it felt like so forced and like shoved down my throat that I kind of just wanted nothing to do with it when I was, finally allowed to make my own decisions and on my own. I wanted this freedom to be able to choose for myself, right? I wanted this freedom to do things that I was always told like were wrong or were not okay. And so going back to kind of what I mentioned earlier about every woman deep down, I think kind of wants to be a dancer because they're craving this like freedom to express their feminine essence. That was something that I didn't really realize that I wanted until I was doing it. And I was like, whoa, like this feels really good. Like this feels so freeing. This feels like I can finally just like be myself and be appreciated for like my beauty, and like I could kind of be somebody else than who I had always been, I guess. Like I almost looked at it as like my alter ego. I was like, ooh, like I'm like, normal Hannah during the day. I go to college. It was like Hannah Montana, honestly. It was kind of funny, where it was like I was just this normal girl that goes to school, gets good grades, and then at night, I'm going and having this secret life that nobody knows about. But it made me feel so confident and so powerful, and I felt like I had control over something, especially because I was making my own money. And it made me feel super empowered. And so that's kind of like what got me in it. And then it kind of just became like addicting. Like once you start making that kind of money and you have that freedom of like, I can go in whenever I want and I can make the rules, and, you know, I can basically, I can do what I want kind of thing. Like, it's hard to go quote unquote like backwards from that into anything else, to where you would be like an employee, or you're only making a certain salary, or whatever it may be. So that kind of kept me like stuck in it. And at the same time, I started dating the DJ at my club. So that's like a whole other thing. But that too, like, kept me kind of stuck in that world, because it was like we were both in it together, and it was like, just, it became a lifestyle, right? It became like, this is what we do, like, this is who we are. And, you know, I couldn't really let go of dancing without also letting go of the relationship, because it was going to continue to be in my life. And so it was kind of just this, like, both of these things kept like pulling at me, and it was like toxic relationships on both sides, you know. And like I said, you know, I could go on and on about this. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's like, it was definitely a toxic relationship, and I would, like, you know, break up with it like many times, but it would constantly pull me back in, because it was easy and it was convenient, and it was what I knew, it was comfortable. And like you kind of touched on, like, the identity thing, I started to realize how much it was a huge part of my identity, because I had been doing it for so long. I'd kind of started to live this lifestyle of a dancer, instead of it just being something I did for fun. It was now like my life. It was my lifestyle. It was a part of me. And because I was dating the guy, you know, that made it even more of a lifestyle. So it was kind of all of that combined. It just made it like really hard to walk away from. And I think just like over the years, like, it's, you know, it just started to just become very real of like how much I didn't align with it. And I think as I started to grow more within myself and within my spirit, like, I started to realize how much I was outgrowing it. And even though I would outgrow it, you know, I would continue to go back. And like I said, it was kind of like this toxic relationship where it's like, you know, it's not good for you, so you like push it away. But then the further away from it you get, you're like, wait, I kind of miss it. Like, let me just try one more time. Like, just one time, you know, and then it like sucks you back in again. And so that was kind of happening with me for like many, many years, honestly. Like, I knew it wasn't for me. I knew it wasn't aligned, but yet I continued to do it because I just didn't know what else to do. Like, I couldn't pull myself out of that like cycle.
You answer my questions before I even ask them, because it's like, I don't know, I feel like we're just aligned. But because I was gonna say, like, this wasn't even part of my question, but then like it just came to my mind. I was gonna be like, what is it like dating when you're a dancer? Because a lot of the times, like, if, like you said that you were dating a DJ, but maybe like you meet a guy in college and he doesn't know nothing about the nightlife, someone could be jealous and it could be hard, you know. Have you ever had a boyfriend that's like, oh, I don't want you to do that anymore?
It's hard to say. I've gotten that question asked many times, because I was only dating my one, the DJ for pretty much the entirety of my like dancing career. So
that's a long time.
Yeah, a long time. You know, a lot of girls, like, surprisingly, most of the girls that work at the club do have boyfriends. And, you know, a lot of them are not healthy relationships. So it just kind of shows you like, it really doesn't work, like, as much as you try. And even with me dating in the club, it had its own pros and cons, but it's like, it was cool because we both understood the lifestyle. So we like kind of like we got each other, right? But at the same time, we still had a lot of those same trust issues.
Talked about, like, you know, that you grew up in church, and so did I. So I totally understand where you're coming from of like rebelling, because for me, like, you know, I'm like almost 10 years younger than you. So even though I'm like 21 right now, but for me it started when I was like 16 years old. So this was like 5 years ago. Like I did like church, and my parents would, I grew up in church, but for me it wasn't more about religion. It was like my mom was like super strict with me, like couldn't have sleepovers, couldn't hang out with nobody. If I did, what's their parents' name, what are you guys doing, what like, and I just hated all of those questions, like, Mom, don't worry about it, like, or it's like, oh, wash the dishes before you go, like clean your room before you go, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just not gonna go anywhere. And so like I started like sneaking out of my window at nighttime. I started running away from home. I started smoking weed. I got expelled from school because I got caught smoking weed at school. I went to 4 different high schools in the 4 years. So I totally understand where you're coming from, like growing up in church, but because your parents are so strict, it kind of like pushes you away. So for me it was like that, but for you it was like going to the nightlife, and so I don't know, like, okay, I didn't write any other questions after this, but I just want to talk more about God, like, so how did you move? Like so you ended up moving states, right? Because like you wanted to live a different life. Tell me more about that.
So first of all, I just want to say, like, I can relate to all of that, like sneaking out the window, and was never able to have sleepovers on Saturday night because we had church on Sunday. Like all those things, I think they just all add up to like you feeling very like frustrated, like you can't do what you want to do and you can't have that freedom. And I think that's ultimately what drives us to, do these rebellious behaviors, which honestly, I think is in a sense can be healthy, because you kind of have to go down that route and find out for yourself, in order to be able to choose like whether you want to, turn back to God or not. And that's like something that I feel is important as far as, if you are being raised in like church and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with having rules to follow. I think it's healthy and important. But I think when it gets to the point where you feel like you can't do anything that you want to do, that's when it gets like bad, to where it's like unhealthy and you just go off the deep end, and I think like it's important for everyone to be able to experience some sort of kind of like turmoil or challenges like as they're growing up, and choose these things that they may think are fun and good that everyone else is doing, and recognize that maybe they're not, right? And I think it's that realization that ultimately allows us to turn back to God, right? And I think for me, that was being a dancer for so long. I realized that, yeah, this lifestyle may have been fun and exciting, and it may have, brought all of these things into my life that seemed really cool, but ultimately it's left me empty, and it's never fulfilling like what needs to be fulfilled in me, right? Like these things, like these temporary sources of gratification, that's all they are, like temporary. And dancing brought a lot of great things, I won't deny, like it really did bring a lot of great things in my life, but ultimately it left me with nothing, right? And like I can sit here and like be like, okay, like what have I taken from this, right? Obviously a lot of life experience and a lot of lessons, but as far as like money wise or blessings, as far as like things that it's given me that are like tangible, like I can't really say that there's anything that like I have right from it. So I think that's with a lot of these things that we end up like rebelling with, like that's how we're ultimately left, is we're thinking that we're getting something, and we're getting this sense of freedom, or we're filling a certain void within us, whether it's like a relationship or drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. Everyone has their own vice, but ultimately the only thing that can truly satisfy is the Lord. And I think after so many years of ending up in that same place where you're like just empty and empty and empty, and you need more and more and more, you either recognize that it's not working, or you just continue to be stuck in that cycle. And it's only a matter of time before, you realize the truth, right? And I think, luckily for us, because we did grow up with God and in the church, we were able to know that that is the answer. And it was ultimately just a decision of, okay, are we going to choose this, or are we going to keep choosing, you know, the world, what the world offers, thinking that's going to fill this void when it's not.
A lot of the things that God tells us, it's not because he doesn't want us to have freedom. It's because he wants to save us the heartache. He wants to save us the trouble. He wants us, like, if you follow those commandments, he's gonna bless you. Like, he's really just trying to save you. You know what I'm saying?